Okay, so in this next session, I'd like to continue and create a simple report, simple accounting report, one of the more common accounting reports for the different entries that we have currently posted here. And that report would be the trial balance. Okay, so just to lay it out, okay, in our sidebar, in our navigation rather, okay, let's add another sort of section here. Let's see. Okay, one for reports, nav reports. And this one will bring us to another list. Nav reports. And what we want is we want to have a link to the trial balance report, which we call conveniently trial balance. Okay, or to be more specific, maybe reports trial balance path, which we don't have right now. So let's go ahead to our routes and say that we have a route to trial balance. Okay, let's have our route point to trial or reports trial balance that is hooked to a controller called reports controller method trial balance. Okay, just keep it simple, and then as reports trial balance. Okay, so that will be our routing definition. Okay. Right there. And what we need is a controller called reports controller. Trial balance. Okay, so okay, by itself, at least on a normal Rails approach, I don't think we can have it using the usual request response cycle. So let's just leave this as a page that renders an HTML under reports trial balance.html.erb. Okay, so let's see. Okay, we already have container fluid here, so this one will simply be row actually, we could already go ahead and just say trial balance. Right, so we have reports, trial balance, and we have our trial balance right there. Okay, so the idea here is we want to... Okay, let's first see what the trial balance looks like. Okay, so it's trial balance for a year. Okay, so apparently all the trial balances here would have a date, something like as of January 31, for example. These are the values for each accounting code, debit credit side, similar to this one. Okay, so our input for our trial balance will just be a single date in this case, and then we want to go through all accounting codes and sort of sum, I guess, or create this sum of all the debits and all the credits for that accounting code as of a particular date. Okay, so let's make this API driven. So aside from having our view, we might have an endpoint. Let's call this reports controller dot RB. Okay, similar to our counting entries endpoint, we just copy paste this. Instead of accounting, we call this reports, and remove everything inside. Okay, let's have a method here for trial balance. And what this would be the endpoint to sort of request. So we need an input here, right? The as of date. Okay, let's make sure that becomes a date, and then reports entries. This should be just reports controller. Okay, and what we want to have is just so our sort of controller endpoint doesn't get too messy, we will have the generation of our trial balance as a separate operation. Okay, so we can say here reports, in case of another directory here for reports, and let's say we have a method called, or rather using the command pattern again, we can have a class called generate trial balance. Okay, and we need a parameter as of. Make this accessible in case we want to access it, and our data will be a bunch of entries, right? An array of entries which you can also access accordingly, and we'll have our logic in execute. Okay, so nice thing about this approach, again using the command pattern, is that we can sort of test or see the behavior of a certain objective or a certain command, in this case generate trial balance, without having to go through the entire cycle. Like, we can actually test this inside our console and see if the values sort of make sense or is giving out the appropriate values. Okay? Right, so in execute, what we actually want to do is we want to create a complex query, right? Wherein we get all the accounting codes and then the sum of all its debits and credits, but all the debits and credits are actually in the journal entries table. Okay, so we also have a total right here. Okay, if we follow this format, so let's say total debit initially 0, total credit initially 0 as well. Okay, so this is what we have to compute when we create our trial balance data, or when we generate our trial balance data with the input of as of. All right, so we need a complex query for this. Let's just review our schema. Okay, so we want to loop through all accounting codes, but for each accounting code we want to get the journal entry value as of that given date. Okay, and the given date, however, is linked to the accounting entry. So we're actually traversing 3 tables in this case, where we also only want to consider the accounting entries whose status is approved, meaning they actually posted the accounting entry. Okay, so we need to traverse 3 tables, and our sort of base, or our main information is, or our main anchor would be based on the accounting codes of our system. Okay, so how would that query look like? Okay, so let's try it out first in the console. We want to create some sort of join. Usually for this case, I'd rather have a raw query rather than force everything in active record. Okay, so let's try to see how can we create a raw query using active record. I believe I looked this up before. Okay, so we have a raw query here. And we simply say active record base connection execute in our string SQL, and we get a bunch of records. Okay, so let's try that first. Let's say our query is to select. Okay, what we want would be the accounting code's ID, the accounting code's name, the sum of all the journal entries amount. Okay. For all debits, actually, for all debits. Okay, as well as a sum for all the, is just prototyping the query, for all credits. Okay, so how would that work? You want to sort of create a table that looks something like this, right? Accounting code name, amount for the journal entries. However, we have a middle table here, accounting entries right there. So how will this work? What's the most efficient way to do this? Could say debit accounting entries, like DR journal entries and CR journal entries. However, we have to define that. Okay, so probably something like we have to do a join from accounting codes, inner join. Okay, so it's hard to do it in the console, so maybe we can do that in the operation. So we have a query here, select accounting codes ID, accounting codes name, the sum, all journal entries, amount. Okay, this one will be for all debit journal entries. For all credit journal entries. From accounting codes, and then we'll have to join journal entries on journal entries accounting code ID is equal to accounting codes.id, and we also have to join accounting entries. Maybe the approach here might be incorrect, but let's just try this first. Accounting entries on accounting entries ID is equal to journal entries dot accounting entry ID, and status is equal to approved. At the same time, the accounting entries date posted is less than or equal to I think we can embed this here as of not sure if we should start with accounting codes. Maybe we should have started with accounting entries, like select all accounting entries, and then we sort of get the group by, perhaps. Well, we should do a group by actually. Group by accounting codes.id. Okay, let's see if this is a valid query by running active. Okay, so let's say records array. Well, it's active record base connection dot query. Oops, what happened? Sorry, not query, but rather execute. You can execute that query. Okay, let's name this as result. And then we can access it as well. All right. Let's try this out. I have awesome print. Right, I have awesome print. All right. So we need an input as of equals date to day, for instance. And then let's see if we can get the result of our operation by saying reports generate trial balance dot new as of actually command okay, and then we say execute. Okay. Oh, I see. dr journal entries is not defined. We can say inner join journal entries as dr journal entries. Okay, there we go. And post type is equal to debit. We inner join journal entries again for credit this time. Okay, I'm not actually starting to doubt this query, if this is the most efficient way to do it. Let's see. Oops, sorry. Let's repeat that. Perhaps he meant reference the table dr journal entries. Oh, okay. So I think this should be dr journal entries, cr journal entries. Now, okay, so we're inner joining also accounting entries. So I think this is correct. The issue here is this one. So does that mean we also have to inner join accounting entries again for credit journal entries? Let's see first. As dr journal entries. Okay, so we really need to make this dr journal entries, cr journal entries. Post type is ambiguous. Okay, so post type is ambiguous because it doesn't know which table it's referring to. Okay, so dr journal entries for the first one and cr journal entries for the second one. So reload that. Duplicate name. Accounting entries applied more than once because of this one right here. Okay, I see. Okay, so maybe we can do a single inner join for accounting entries on accounting entries equals this one. Maybe we can do an OR here. Or accounting entries dot id equals cr journal entries accounting entry id. Okay, can review the query later on. Let's just make it work first. Okay, there we go. So how do you make use of this, or what happened? Okay, so we zoom out here. Okay, so we want to reference two sides of our journal entries, right? According to this guide, we want to sum all cash, for example, that are considered debit, as well as all cash that are considered credit, or that were used in a credit journal entry, a credit posting. So we need two sides, right? couldn't do. I'm not sure if we can do a sum conditional here. So the way I thought of it is that we join journal entries table just for all debit entries, and we name that table dr journal entries, and then inner join cr journal entries. Okay, where post type is cr, and then we join accounting entries so that we filter out all accounting entries with date posted less than or equal to our as of date. And however, we need to sort of join them according to the table of our dr journal entries and cr journal entries. So we have an or here and an and here. Okay, just to make it more clear, on this condition and this condition. Right? Okay, so maybe you can have this as an array. Okay, let's see how this, if 2a actually works. Oh, there we go. Okay, so if we have 2a, we convert the result of the execute to an array. Okay, there's something wrong here. We're expecting 4. Let's see. We're expecting 4 fields. The ID, the name, and the sum. As, okay, let's give this an alias. dr amount. And this one as cr amount. Let's try it again. Okay, there we go. dr amount and cr amount for food, and dr amount and cr amount for cash. Okay, and that's essentially, I think, our report, right? Our trial balance data. I think. Okay, let's actually verify that. Let's check out our accounting entries. Okay, so we have, as of February, 100 for cash, manual testing. Okay, 0 here. Oh, that's weird. Cash should only be 100, I think. Cash 100 for debit. Is it debit? Yeah, 400. Why is it 460? Okay, so there must be some error here. Okay, let's try to debug it. Okay. If we try to query it manually, so we know that the accounting code for cash has this ID, so we can say journal entry dot sum amount, or rather journal entry where post type is debit and accounting code ID is equal to this one, sum amount. Yeah, this should give us just 100, but what our operation is giving us is 400. Okay, so our query is incorrect, essentially. Okay, so let's try to correct this. Can we actually do this? Okay, so there might be something wrong here. Let's try to do this in pure PostgreSQL. Okay, so use pgadmin for this. Okay, let's see. Bookkeeper. Okay, so let's copy this entire thing. Change the parameter here to 2020 02 04. Okay, so where did we go wrong? Okay, so we select from accounting codes. We should just sort of inner join just journal entries and then inner join accounting entries, right? Maybe there is conditionals select distinct. We could do a win. Or select some from maybe an inner select. Is that the best way to do it? Did have a group by here. If we remove this, yeah, syntax error. It should appear here. Okay, so why is this the case? Because we're joining two tables, I believe. Maybe we should select from journal entries. We select from journal entries. Okay, so the idea there is if we start from, okay, let's start from scratch here. Well, not entirely from scratch. Say we start from journal entries. And then we join. Okay, assuming no accounting entries yet. Okay, but we do have accounting codes ID, so we could say something like the following. Inner join accounting codes on accounting codes.id is equal to journal entries dot accounting code ID. Okay, let's try to solve this first. Okay, so this one will repeat here for all journal entries. What we want is the debit part here, so I think it's the same thing. Journal entries, amount. So the problem here is we sum all amounts. Okay, group by. It's the same thing actually. There we go. We want to make sure that this is for debit and then another column for credit. So what's the best way to do this? Some case when condition 1 then t1 dot amount. Is that possible? Some amount, there is some case. So this here. Case when condition 1, so journal entries that post type is equal to credit. What will happen? Or rather debit. Then journal entries amount else 0. And as dr amount. Okay, let's try this. Nope. Missing from clause. Okay, probably not the best way to do this. Unless we have separate queries, but that's not ideal. Let's see. How do we have conditional sum? Even inner select. Let's check this out. Maybe you can do a distinct. You can do a distinct on distinct on journal entries ID. Could work. Hang on. Because we have a group by. If we didn't have the group by, what's the result again? Okay. Well, we could always do the following, right? Journal entries amount and then journal entries post type. Okay, to get that large table and then sort of filter it out on the Ruby end. Yeah, maybe that could work. Right, so yeah, let's try that. So we can inner join accounting codes and journal entries, and then we do another inner join on accounting entries this time. On accounting entries dot id is equal to journal entries dot accounting entry id, and the accounting entries status is equal to approved. Let's just put this down here. And accounting entries dot date posted is less than or equal some date. Okay, something like that. Okay, so let's modify this. Okay, actually, we can sort of leave. I can actually still start with accounting codes. Okay, I think we can still start with accounting codes. Let's just remove the CR here. Okay, so we're just left with journal entries. And then for accounting entries, as long as the accounting entries journal entries is equal accounting on accounting entries dot id is equal to journal entries dot accounting entry id, right? And the status is approved and the date posted is less than or equal to as of. Okay, and what we want to select is the amount as well as the post type. Okay, let's try this. Should have the same result as in PG admin. Okay, there we go. And then we sort of just aggregate it on the Ruby end. Okay, so this is our result. Let's just have this as a separate thing. Fetch result, for instance. Let's make this a private method. Okay, and shove everything here. Let me say fetch result, just so it's much more organized, so to speak. Okay, so we have that. We could also select the code from accounting codes. Okay, so let's put that in as well. Okay, so now we want to fill in our entries array from result. So we map our result. Okay, how do we map our result? Well, have something like this. Okay, so what we can do is we can select from result all values where the accounting code ID. Okay, let's just make sure we're doing it correctly. Okay, so let's do it manually first. I think we can group by accounting code. Okay, let's execute this. Okay, this is our result. We can group by group by okay, let's just review the syntax for group by. I think I can do the following. So let's see what this results to. Okay. I got it. All right, so we can actually group by the ID of our accounting code, right? Okay, I got it. All right, let's try the following out. So once we fetch the result, we can say result. Okay, the reason why you can call result without the @ sign is because we have it as an accessor value here, accessor symbol result. Okay, so we can say result.groupBy. Maybe we can group by, our key will be a hash containing the ID. I think this can work. And the name of our accounting code. So in this case, name. And then so our entries is equal to group by the ID and the name, and then we can perform a sum, right? Okay, so we can inject 0 first. Okay, let's just make sure that we're doing it correctly first. Okay, what do we want? Oh no, sorry. We can map something. Okay, we'll map this according to our accounting code hash. Okay, so the accounting code hash will be represented by this one, and the transactions will be represented by TXS. Okay, so what we're actually doing is we're creating a new mapping for entries, which has the structure for ID, accounting code hash, ID, something like that. Well, we could do a fetch, I think, on this hash. Maybe the bracket will be alright. Let's see if this works. Name. And then for our DR amount, we can sum all the transactions. Let's first select T, where T fetch amount, rather post type, is a debit, right? We select that all, and then we inject 0, sum hash, sum plus h dot fetch amount. Okay, let's make this an F and round it off to 2, which will give us our debit amount. And then our CR amount, just change this to CR, select all transactions, CR, inject 0, sum hash, fetch amount, round 2. Okay, comma right there, and that will be for our entries. Let's see if it works. Okay, let's just correct this first. I think we should have up to F here, but should round this round again. Let's execute this. And there we go. There. Okay, this is our trial balance data. Okay, other things we can put in. The as of course, as of, just so we can reference it. And for the total debit and total credit, total debit. Okay, so from our entries, we can then inject 0, sum h, sum plus h. Okay, we need to filter this out first. Okay, so select all stuff where the okay, I don't think we need to select. Okay, so we can just inject 0 again, sum hash. Okay, so what we're doing here is we're injecting 0 first and then sort of incrementing the value that we just injected, 0, with the dr amount for each hash object from our entries. Okay, around to here. Same goes for credit. This one becomes cr amount. Okay, and of course we return data for that. Okay, so let's try this out. Okay, there we go. Total debit, total credit, and our as of date, giving us our trial balance data. Okay, in a nice operation or a command class. Alright, so now that we have that, next thing we can now do is hook it up to an API for reports. Okay, so we can say get reports trial balance to reports trial balance. Okay, so in our API namespace, we actually already have that. So now we need our data, which we get from reports, generate trial balance .new as of. You can simply execute it here. Okay, and then you say render JSON data. Okay, let's just start our server and see if it actually works. Okay, so API v1 reports trial balance, and let's pass in as of equals 2020 0205. Okay, we get our data right there. Okay, so now that we have that, we can now probably hook it up to our view. Okay, so nothing special here. We need an input. Okay, so we can have something like row. Okay, this will be some sort of controls. Okay, so this will be our input for our as of date. Input type is date. Let's give it an ID. Input as of. Farm group. As of. Alright, let's see what this looks like in plain HTML. Okay, so we have our date there. Let's have a value, a default value of the date today. Okay. And then aside from that, let's copy this. Okay, we have a button here. Give it a class. Right, something like that. So when you click generate, the trial balance should appear here with a default as of date right there. Let's give this an ID so we can reference it in JavaScript later on. Okay, button generate. Okay, now okay, we need JavaScript for this. So under reports, we'll have trial balance.js. Okay, we need Bootstrap, of course. And our revealing pattern for JavaScript. And I think down there we have to export it. Okay. Instead of show, this would be trial balance. There we go. Okay. Let's put in some line numbers. Okay. Alright, so just like what we did with our other custom JavaScript, this one returns init. Our init is a function. Okay, let's just make sure that same thing. Options. Okay, we need our authenticity token just in case. And of course our bind events as well as our cache DOM. Okay, so we just have two input elements here for the time being. So this one is input as of, and our button generate. Cache DOM, we reference it accordingly. Then our events, so whenever we click button generate on click, okay, we disable the input. As well as our button. Okay, so disabled, but before that we have to get our value. Right there. Okay. Let's remove these other references. Okay, so it's not working yet because we haven't hooked it up yet. Do you need to hook up anything? Right, everything is included here by default, I think. How did we do it for show? JavaScript. Oh, JavaScript pack tag, alright. And then let's just copy this our trial balance page. There we go. This one will be for reports, trial balance. And we don't have any parameters. We just need the authenticity token. We say trial balance dot init. Okay. Just so we can hook up the JavaScript in our custom JavaScript trial balance in our page. Work. Let's try it out. No, still not working. Why? Maybe we have an error. Okay, reference error. Input as of is not defined. Okay, so it wasn't. I think we're using a lowercase a. It should be capitalized. Let's try to refresh this. Hopefully it compiles properly. Compiling. Okay, there we go. Click and it's disabled. Alright. So when it's disabled, we can now call our URL for generate, which is in API v1 reports trial balance. Okay, so we do the same thing. Ajax, our URL will be URL generate, our data will be as of success. This one is just a get. Success, do something. For error, let's just alert for now. Error in fetching trial balance data. Now if it's successful, let's just check out the data that's being returned, right? So again, of course, we make this false. True, false. Copy this here. All right. So check out our console. Okay, so we have our data right there. Right. Okay. Now, it's actually quite tedious if we build our HTML here, so maybe it's time to get a templating library that will allow us to sort of display the contents of our trial balance report. And my go-to templating for like really low level JavaScript, not low level, but very simple JavaScript will be Mustache.js. So how do we install this? How did we install Bootstrap? Okay. Can't do anything else. So I think we can just do something like yarn install Mustache. Save. Yarn add. Okay. Yarn add Mustache. Save. Okay, let's see. Okay, so we have Mustache right there. I'm not entirely sure how we can import Mustache via Webpacker. What we did in with Bootstrap is we simply imported Bootstrap. So maybe we can do import Mustache, if that makes sense. So let's try to refresh this and see if there are any errors. Okay, no errors so far. And the idea there is we need a template. Okay, if you check out Mustache's sort of syntax. Okay, you can have a script with some ID, and then it has its special syntax for inserting values into it when we call the render method for the template, which is just a string of HTML stuff, right? So in that case, for reports, let's say we have templates here, and then wrong directory, in our views rather, say templates, and let's say we have here a partial called trialbalance.html.erb, and the contents of that would be a script tag with an ID. Let's call this template trial balance. Okay, and I think optionally we can have a type right there, though I don't think the type is necessarily required. And then we have our HTML inside here. So for example, we want to generate the as of date, right? So we have HTML here, let's say an h5 as of, and then we can insert an object called as of, right? Or since we're passing the entire object, we'll just say curly brace as of. Right, let's try to render this first. Okay, so in our trial balance html.erb, let's just make sure that we're rendering the partial templates trial balance. Okay, so that in our JavaScript we can reference this template. Okay, so we have template trial balance. Okay, and what template trial balance is template is that we query trial balance, that script element, and we take its HTML template trial balance, which becomes our template trial balance, which we pass to Mustache upon success. So upon success, before making the UI elements clickable again or active in this case, we can now say mustache.render. Okay, first argument would be our string template, right? And the render returns the rendered template, in this case template trial balance, and we pass our response. All of this will be inside another div, or we render it inside our div for trial balance, which we don't have yet. So let's go ahead and create another thing here. Okay, there we go. And let's give this an ID for content. Right, so this is where we would render our trial balance mustache, or rather the template rendered by Mustache. Okay, so we have content. Of course, we reference it in our cache DOM. Alright. And let's say that when we're generating it, our content will say something like loading. Okay. However, on success, we'll change the HTML to contain the rendered version from Mustache. If we have an error, we'll say content HTML error. Alright, let's see if this works. Oops, missing partial, templates, trial balance. Okay, so if we're dealing with embedded partial, we have to use the path relative to views. So this one becomes reports / templates trial balance. Right. Okay. Okay. Uncaught reference error. Mustache is not defined. Okay, the entire thing. Okay, the entire content. Okay, well, I can't do content because we already have, I think, content right there. Alright, so let's just change this to report content instead. Okay, this one becomes report content. Okay, I'm a bit OC, so I'll say report content for the name of the variable. Report content. So this one becomes, let's change all content to report content. Let's try that again. Okay, so we have uncut, reference error, mustache is not defined. I think we need to export it somewhere. Do we need to restart the server? Mustache should have worked. Okay, so mustache can't be defined yet. Why? I think we have to include it in the global part. Where did we put that part? Where? Keep forgetting where. This is for assets. Huh. Where's the configuration for... Why can't it see mustache? Okay, let's try it. Real 6 import JavaScript. Require. Should have worked. Oh, this one. It's exported globally, I think. I think we still have to export mustache. Because mustache is not exposed. Something like window.mustache. That doesn't make sense. Okay, so we added something. Oh, okay. I think I need to do something like this. From. Let's try that again. Oh, there we go. Okay, so we had to do something like mustache. Import mustache from mustache. I don't think we need import bootstrap, because it should have been already included. Yeah, okay, so we didn't actually need the import bootstrap for that. Alright, so import mustache from mustache. Okay, so now it's rendering here. Now what we can do right now with mustache is have our template render the entries part. Okay, so here we sort of loop against all entries and then display the necessary values, right? So you can use a table for that. And in Mustache, let's create a table first. To do a loop, okay, I think it's hashtag entries, and we end it with slash entries, right? We have our dr here, and then column here. This one will correspond to the name. Okay, so we can, so for each object inside entries, we can call directly the key of that object, in this case name. Let's see how that looks like first. Okay, so that's cash food accounts payable. Oh, before that, I think let's put a T head here and then a T body here. Let's put in the entries. This is a row. Accounting code. Let's float this to the right. Debit and credit. Okay. Class is text right. Okay, this one will hold the DR amount. This one will hold the credit amount. Okay. And there we go, our trial balance. Okay. Okay, before we forget, we need to have a total here at the bottom. So that's another row. Total. And then that's right. Total debit. Total credit. There we go. Let's make this strong as well, just to emphasize the total. Alright, there we go. Let's see if this works with January. Alright, so the values changed because these are only values as of January. Okay, so still a lot of work to do. I mean, we still need to before we commit this, just as a review, so what we added here, okay, we have a static page to the trial balance, and then we have an API for trial balance. The API for trial balance will contain simply an endpoint under reports that requires an input parameter as of, which we pass to a command pattern class generate trial balance. Generate trial balance is an operation, or a command pattern based operation that requires the as of. So you give it the as of, it will generate an object or a hash, data hash containing the as of, the entries as an array, total debit, total credit. Our query is a custom query that selects the accounting ID, code name, amount, post type, joined from accounting codes, journal entries on accounting code equals accounting code's ID. We inner join the accounting entry so that we only filter out the entries that were posted, which is status equals approved, and the date posted is less than or equal to as of. Okay, we fire it off in the low-level execute method from active record base, turn it to an array, and store it in our result. The logic for our execute after fetching the result from the database will be to have Ruby sort of do the aggregated part. Okay, but there might be a better way to do this, but for now we're having Ruby deal with aggregating logic from our result, since we're just getting the amount and post type. Okay, using that information, we can group by according to some object from the accounting code ID name, and then we map that hash and its corresponding transactions to the following structure. And now we can get the DR amount by summing all the amounts whose post type is DR. And same goes for CR, credit accounts. Total debit will just be the same thing. We sum everything that has a DR amount, sum everything that has a CR amount, and return data. On the front end, we have a JavaScript that allowed us to interact with the API. Have some input elements as of. When we generate the data, when we click the generate button, it will attempt to call the API endpoint. And then using Mustache, we can render a sort of template, pass the object to it, and have our custom report accordingly based off the values that was returned by our API. Okay, so let's commit this. Let's call this initial trial balance report. Oops.